To start with, Your Majesty, I'm so pleased and delighted to have this conversation with Sarah. And I will begin by telling you a little bit about her book. So Sarah's book is a memoir of the family, and it's narrated through essays. And as she was introduced, it was set in Allahabad and in Banaras. And she talks about these places very vividly in the book. Brahman Road bungalow in Allahabad, and a very, in fact, in the old town in Banaras, your maternal home was called Nawab Ki Deori, your ancestral house. And when I was reading this book, I haven't been to Allahabad, but I've been to Banaras, and I actually looked up, and this place still exists. Yeah, so that was very heartening. Each essay in Sarah's book is very distinct, yet connected, I would say. People and places are built up throughout the book, and as you progress reading it, there is an evocative image of the people and the time that they lived in. I found that very, very interesting. And the second thing that I really liked, Sarah, was that you have, in your narration, you have it richly interspersed with things about nature. Like I remember exam time when I was younger, and you mentioned, a bird called lapwing, and you mentioned the call. And until the time I read your book, I could not have, expressed it. And the lapwing says something like, "Did he do it? Did he do it?" Yes, it reminds me. Yes, it reminds me of the exam time. And then you also, I really found the book interesting because you interact with a lot of things that I had while growing up in my childhood. You talk of this berry, which is found in the northern plains, Karonda, right? Yeah, so food was such a big part of our growing up. We were not going out to eat in restaurants. So any special thing that you made at home, and through your book, one can relive a lot of these memories. So I will start by asking you, Sarah, about, how you began this journey of writing. Because you've studied in a convent, and you've had your maternal and paternal families were very distinct. So how you started this journey of writing?
Am I audible? Yeah, okay. I'd like to begin by thanking you, Your Majesty, for giving me this wonderful opportunity to come to Bhutan, which I've always heard of as a semi-mythical kind of place, and I never thought I would actually ever get there. And so thank you from the bottom of my heart for inviting me here. And all the lovely people of Bhutan, all the people that I've met here. Fascinating to find that a place can be defined by an index of happiness rather than some kind of economic index, or, it's very unique, I think. To answer your question, Amrita, my childhood was spent in the 1960s in North India, in the town of Allahabad, and my mother's parents, my mother's people came from Banaras, which is about 3 hours away from Allahabad. So those were slow times, very slow times. We didn't have TV, we didn't have internet. And the house where I lived, Allahabad was a city primarily, it was a colonial town. It had many bungalows, very large bungalows. They were really large. The land, say, like our house measured about 11,000 square yards, or, the land. And there were orchards and gardens. So, and the next house was quite far away. So you didn't really meet many people. So because there was nothing really very much else to do, and also because we got into the habit of enjoying nature. So we would watch things. It was possible in those times to watch, say, flower open. Or, I used to love squeezing a lemon, for instance, in a pond and see the lovely colors that it made. little things like that, your observations of nature and the insights that came to you, they go inside you and they remain somewhere in your memory. They become part of a kind of sensory existence inside you which goes deeper than memory. And somehow that is, I think, connected at a very deep level with language and with writing, because when you're writing, all kinds of memories come into play. And I think I'm intercepting, I think we were,
Yes,
the
we're
memory,
talking about,
yeah.
yes, both language and memory.
Yeah, language and memory.
Yes.
So they are interconnected, I think. And I think the very first thing that we do when we are looking at the world around us, that in itself is an act of translation. Because when we see the world, we are seeing it in images. And when we are writing, we are already translating it into words. So my life has been one of translating first images into words and then translating those words from one language into another language, and also writing my own, which is also an act of translation. So I grew up with several languages around me because we went to school. It was an English medium school in which the nuns were German, so they had a very distinct way of teaching. Every syllable had to be very clear. And there was particular stress on words, like you had to say industry, not industry, and emergency, not emergency, stuff like that. It was very, very particular way of pronouncing words.
Yeah.
So there was that English in school. Then there was Hindustani, which is a mixture of Hindi and Urdu that we spoke at home. And there was Awadhi, which is the local language spoken in Allahabad. There was Bhojpuri, which is the local language of Banaras. And my grandmother spoke that language. So there was this mix of languages that I was growing up with. And I have to say that this was a condition that is not particular to me. It is a condition particular to South Asia, I think, where all of us grew up with many languages. So even when you're writing, choosing a language to write in, if I'm writing in English, there's a pressure of Hindi pushing itself up behind it. And if I'm writing in Hindi, there's the English playing inside me. So we grow up as multilingual people, and our memories are also shaped by what we observe around us.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And you started writing in Hindi first, or was it Urdu?
Actually, the very first story I wrote was when I was 8 years old. It was in English.
It was in
English.
Okay.
And it got published just by fluke because a friend of my brother's, they were bringing out this magazine, Arvind Krishna Mehrotra. They were in college. I was a child at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So they were bringing out this magazine called Damn You, which was a very kind of provocative and sensational magazine at that time. Yeah. So they said, they were looking for material and said, why not put her story into this? So they published that also. So my first published work was at the age of 8, which was hardly a story, I would say. It was just an imitation of Enid Blyton. We used to read quite a lot at that point. So it was an imitation of an Enid Blyton story, which kind of started me off. But then I didn't write for a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And
the book, Raw Amber, that we're talking about, how did you start assimilating content for the memoir?
Well, actually, I didn't really assimilate the content. The content lived within me. I was writing these essays. They were about my parents, about my father. It started out being about my father.
Yes.
And I wrote this one long chapter called About My Father, which became split into 3 chapters in this book.
Yes.
So it was while he was still alive. And then when he died, I continued writing it. But the dead speak differently to you.
Yes.
So it changed in that process. And once I had this, my father was there, then I had to write about my grandfather. Everyone said that you must write about your grandfather. How can you not write about Premchand? Because he was not going to be part of this book. It was going to be, because the minute you say Premchand, everything becomes about him. Everyone else gets forgotten. So I did not want to write about him. But then I did. And my grandmother, both my grandmothers, my mother, and my 2 mothers, I call them because my mother's sister was also like my mother.
Yes.
So my 2 mothers, my 2 grandmothers, and my father and my grandfather.
Okay. So I was going to put up this question to you first. Throughout in our earlier sessions, we have heard about women writers, and Will has spoken about his mother. And also in Bhutan, you see we have a set of very strong, independent, very driven women, right? Her Majesty has been
Yes.
an example. She's driving so many ideas and projects into fruition. And you have had many strong women in the family, and they come out beautifully in this memoir. Would you like to first talk about your grandmothers?
Yes, my grandmothers, both of my grandmothers, my maternal grandmother and my paternal, they were both very strong women. And my paternal grandmother, she was quite active in the freedom movement of the country, and she had strong political opinions. And my grandfather, who also wrote a lot, and he wrote a lot of it was when he was writing, this was the time of great ferment in the country. There was this fight against the British going on. So he was writing about that, and she was also sort of with him on this, in this entire struggle. So their lives were personal and political at the same time, like they lived the politics of their time. So my grandmother was also very much part of that. And people remember my grandfather, of course, but nobody remembers my grandmother. She didn't write that much, but then she contributed, in a sense, to a sort of triple erasure, because firstly she was a woman, and then she was a woman writer, and then she was Premchand's wife, so she got completely finished from that whole thing.
Yeah.
But she was an extremely strong woman, and people used to call her Premchand's dictator, because she was a very small woman, and she used to tell him what to do, and he'd be, basically listening to her,
Yes,
whatever
and
she said.
Premchand also called her Yodha Stri.
Yodha Stri, which means a warrior woman.
A
So she
warrior
was
woman.
she had this very strong kind of voice.
Yes.
So she was extremely strong woman. And my maternal grandmother was also a very strong woman, because she was like the figurehead of the family. I mean, everyone used to bow down to whatever she wanted, and she influenced the life of her children quite a lot, and the daughters learned from her. So I have grown up with strong women around me. So all this talk, when people say that Indian women are so fragile and they are so, dominated and all that, so it just doesn't sound right to me, because all the women that I've seen have been extremely strong women, and that's how I find a link with Bhutan also, because I find Your Majesty, strong woman here,
Yes,
who can be
right
a model
from,
for a strong woman.
Yes, right from the Queen
Yeah.
Grandmother to her
Yes.
sister, Queen Grandmother's
Yes,
sister, their
absolutely.
Majesties. Everybody has been very, very instrumental
Yes,
in bringing out things, change in the country.
yes,
So, so your aunt also, who was living in Banaras, you
Yes.
spent a lot of time with her
yes.
in this. So I will now go on to the men in the family, and the chapter about your grandfather. It's called The Ancestor in the Cupboard.
Yes, that's right.
Because I think you had never met him, and your father was also very young. And you kind of rediscovered your grandfather, Premchand, who was called Nawab Rai before he took the pen name Premchand.
Yes.
How was that experience? How did you build him up in your writings?
Well, my grandfather, since nobody in my generation and also my mother had never seen him, because he died when he died young. He died at 56, and my parents got married only 12 years after he died. So nobody really ever got to see him, except, of course, my father, who was also quite young at that point. He was about 20 years old. So he was deeply influenced by his father, of course, but then he had this immense responsibility that descended on him after his father's death, because my grandfather had written a huge amount, and there was a publishing press that had to be handled. There was some magazines that he was bringing out, and there was this whole kind of missionary zeal to his writing, in a kind of political sense. So all that tradition had to be carried forward. So my father was learning from all that. And in some ways, my father, because there was no money in the family, so he was a sort of self-made person, and then he started publishing the books of my grandfather, and somehow built up this publishing enterprise, which was spread over several cities in North India. So he was a totally different personality from his father, because his father had been quite an extroverted personality. My father was not an extrovert. He was a quiet man with very set habits and very kind of whimsical, eccentric, I would call him. So he was very different from his father, but he was deeply interested in reading, like all the people in my family were reading, and also writing, I would say. My parents were writing, so were my grandparents, my aunts and uncles. So it was a family of writers, which is why when I started writing, it felt almost as if when you fall in love, you fall into writing. So I fell into writing rather than falling in love. So I fell in love with books. So I was reading a lot, and that shaped my childhood, since other people in school had friends and I had books. You know, they were my deepest friends always. So that was how my childhood shaped up, in the presence of these people. And the idea of my grandfather was very strong in the house, even though nobody had seen him. His ideals of, commitment to the poor, and his sort of disdain for money, his kind of idea of money rather, it was percolated through to the next generations as well. So there was a sort of frugality that was idealized in the household. In fact, I remember when I was very young, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, somebody, like people do when guests come, they say, "Oh, and what do you want to be when you grow up?" So somebody asked me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" So I said, "I want to be poor." So this answer was, so he was quite taken aback with that answer. But this was like, being of modest means was something of value in our home rather than the other way around. So that was the kind of atmosphere that I grew up in.
Yes. And also in your book, you have many, many references of the 60s. Like you mentioned the car, Studebaker car. I think at that time it was quite rare to have that car. But once your father's business or his publishing house was doing well, you also had these little luxuries which you remember very fondly in your book. So Sarah, I would want to ask you, what has been the struggle and joy in creating literature, which you've done? You've started with writings, and then you've started with translations, you've translated many works. So what has been, the...
Well, I would say writing has been a struggle for me. For a long time I didn't write, because there was this whole thing of which language to write in going on inside me. And somehow it felt wrong for me to be writing in English, because I was Premchand's granddaughter, for one. And secondly, I had been brought up in an English medium school, so I felt it would be natural for me to write in English. So there was this kind of, and there were the other languages that I was trying to deal with, which were always pushing up. So for a long time, this struggle about which language to write in and what to write, because I was not really meeting many people, as I said. All the bungalows that we lived in were far apart from each other. So I didn't seem to have the material to write, nor the language to write it in. So I wondered why I was insisting on being a writer. But I somehow felt that there was a writer inside me, and I just wanted to do it. And in all these years of struggling with language and wondering which language to write in, I stumbled upon the word shabd. Shabd is a Sanskrit-derived word, which means sound, and it also means word. So this word somehow seemed serendipitous to me. It created a bridge between the visual language and the audio, like language that you hear within me. And somehow I realized that there were languages of many kinds. There were languages that didn't really lead to any meaning. For instance, if you sat on a bullock, I got the chance to ride on a bullock cart once, and the creaking of the wheels, it had a certain rhythm and it had a certain sound. So that was a language of a different kind. And then, of course, there was the written language. So somehow this word created a bridge between these two things, and it seemed important to me as a writer. So I kind of, because even when you're writing, there are all kinds of things working inside you. It's not just, the word and the mind that is transferring what is, on the paper.
Yes.
But it's memory, because memory is also of various kinds. I mean, it's not only cerebral memory. There's memory in your hands, which remember touching something. There's memory in your eyes that remember seeing something or listening to something. And when you're writing, the whole act of writing, it all comes together when you're writing. And all these different memories come to play, and they bear upon your writing.
Absolutely.
So
I think that's what makes the book so wonderful. It's a wonderful read. And I also found that in the appendix in the book, you have
We have 10 minutes.
Yes,
Yeah.
you have included 4 stories, and these 4 stories are from your grandmother, your mother, and your aunt,
Yes.
and of course, there's one
my
from
grandfather. Yes.
your grandfather.
Yes.
And that was such a bonus because you had built up these characters through your writings, through the narratives in the essay, and then we actually got to read these works.
Yes.
So your grandmother, Shivrani Devi, had actually first written the first biography of Premchand was written by her,
Yes.
and which she'd called Premchand Ghar Mein.
Premchand Ghar Mein, Premchand at home.
Yes.
So, yeah, one biography was written by my grandmother, and the other biography was written by her son, my uncle, which is called Kalam Ka Sipahi, which means the soldier of the pen. So there are 2 biographies. And these stories that I've included in the memoir right at the end was because I've been speaking about these people, my grandmothers and my aunts and my mother. So I thought that the reader should perhaps get to hear their voice in their voice also. So I just translated those stories to add into this book. So
Yeah.
that forms the appendix.
Yes, and also the press had translated your grandfather's works in many languages,
Yes.
right? There is Premchand's works are available in many languages across the world.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, and I found the story done by your mother, which in Hindi was Aam Ke.
Aam Ke Baur.
Aam
There's,
Ke Baur.
mango blossoms in this.
Yes, it's a beautiful story, again set in Banaras.
Yeah.
And she was a very, very accomplished musician.
Yes.
Because in this story, the whole ragas, everything that you described,
Yes.
was it out of memory? You,
Yes,
I presume you're also an accomplished.
She told me about this story and what went into the writing of it. So
Okay.
this story is about 4 different loves. It's
Okay.
about the love of nature. It's about love and love of music and love of nature. Did I say nature?
Yes.
Basically, it has 4 loves in it. And I think all these loves are so beautifully integrated in this story. And she would tell us about this story. And going to a music performance, Ustad Fayyaz Khan was singing, and she described the whole performance. And so she incorporated that into
her story.
Into her story. So
Yeah.
it became quite.
Yes, they had quite
Yes.
a upbringing in your maternal grandmother's house, because your mother, you also describe her as, she was an accomplished singer, then she was in tune with nature, she did a lot
Oh,
of
yes.
gardening,
Yes.
and she also had a little medicine cupboard. She
Oh,
was
yes.
a first responder. I think that's how.
She was a woman of many talents, and she
Yeah.
did many things. I mean, her first love was music. And
Yes.
then she was very much into gardening, and she
Yeah.
had green fingers. Whatever she planted took root.
Yes.
Then she was bursting with vitality. Whatever she did somehow came alive, and she'd sort of take some old tea cozy with the colors faded, and she'd knit it again,
Yes.
knit patterns on it again, and the whole thing would start glowing.
Yes.
And she was very enthusiastic, and she had this very catching kind of enthusiasm. So she would, I think just now we heard in the session before this that she would get talking to Will's mother.
Yes.
Will's mother would talk to everyone he met. So she was also like that. She
Yes.
talked to anyone she met on trains and on the roadside, anywhere. She just began to talk.
Yes.
So she was like that too, and she was like this very completely different from my father, who was a very introverted person. She was very extroverted, and she would talk a lot and
Yes.
would have a lot of stories to recite.
Yeah. So about your creative writing, you say, I quote you here, you say creative writing lessons have consisted of reading, right? And this environment of nurturing reading from a very young age for you all, and also for your grandmother, Shivrani Devi.
Yes.
Once she got married, and she was married to your grandfather at a young age,
Yes.
right? She was a widow, right? So it also nurtured the writing in her later in her life,
Yes, yes.
right? So I found it very interesting that you said that for the longest time, creative writing lessons have consisted of reading. I think that was a very important message you gave, that before you actually
Yes.
start penning down things, you have to be.
You have to read a lot, and
You
that
have-
sets your imagination free, because writing is also about inhabiting other people.
Yes.
So you have to inhabit other worlds first
Yes.
before you can get down to writing about your own.
Yes.
So that's extremely important, I think.
Yes.
And my grandmother, of course, started writing because once she was married to my father, she started writing.
Yes. So this is, I would encourage people to read Sarah's book. I don't want to give it away with more anecdotes that are mentioned, very interestingly put, and they remind you of a time that was so important for the country and how we have come, how far we have come along.
Yes.
Right? Is there anything that you'd like to add that you liked about?
Yes, I would like to talk about how in 2005, I had the chance to go back to my grandfather's village, which is near Banaras, about 3 kilometers away from Banaras. It's called Namahi. So they were having a little celebration for his 125th anniversary. And lots of people, I mean, there were some important ministers who were to come for it. But what amazed me was that it was blazing July, the month of July, which is extremely hot. So the whole ground was completely covered with people sitting there, outside the pandals and, inside. And it was bright and sunny, boiling. And I just asked myself, who are these people? Why are they here? Are they all readers of Premchand? Why are they there? And then it occurred to me that all these people, they are there to pay homage to a writer who has changed the map of the literary world. Because writing before Premchand was tales of magic and fantasy, and he is the one who changed it completely and brought the common man onto the stage. So all these people are here because he made them feel as if their lives too count for something, that this is not only about some faraway people that they are reading about, but it's their lives that are being dealt with in his. So that's a very important shift that happened in literature with the coming of Premchand. So this is his writing, and which is why all these people, who many of them are illiterate themselves, they can't read, they can't write, but they are there just to pay obeisance to this writer who has meant so much for them. I think the time is up.
Yes, we could take some questions for Sarah.
नमस्ते। पहले तो मुझे यही नहीं पता था कि आप प्रेमचंद की ग्रैंड डॉटर हैं। तो ये अपने आप में बहुत उल्लास और उमंग देता है मेरे को। एक सवाल था प्रेमचंद के संबंध में।
हाँ, बताइए।
कि उनको मुंशी प्रेमचंद क्यों कहते थे?
मुंशी क्योंकि वो उनकी ज़ात की वजह से कहते होंगे मुंशी, क्योंकि मुंशी लोग लिखते हैं, तो वो भी लिखते थे, और कायस्तों में अक्सर मुंशी लगाया जाता है, तो इस वजह से भी मुंशी कहा जा सकता है।
अच्छा, कायस्तों में लगाया जाता है?
लगाया जाता है, और वो लिखते थे, लिखने का काम करते थे।
हाँ हाँ हाँ,
तो इसलिए।
That's all.
Any other questions? Yes, we have. The last, he was asking grandfather, he had another title. It was his pen name, Premchand was his pen name, but there was another title attached to it called Munshi. Munshi is a...
Munshis are scribes, actually.
Scribes.
So they are
So that
writers.
title, because of his writings, prolific writings, that title was also added. Yes. Is there any other question for Sarah? Yes.
Thank you, Ma'am Namrata, Ma'am Sarah. I have a question for Sarah ji. that of all the books that you've published, which one is the closest to your heart and why? And I have a second question that, you know, for a writer, we as readers, we see the book, you know, the work, but what is the hard work behind it? What is it your day-to-day before you publish that book? Thank you.
I think Sarah describes it beautifully in her first chapter, Palimpsest.
I think the act of writing, you're always writing. The act of writing begins when you begin to live. I think when you're imbibing things around you, everything is, you're absorbing the atmosphere around you. And so it's only when you sit down with a pen and paper or with a computer, if you write on a computer, that all these memories and everything that is being written onto the hard drive of your mind, that all comes into play. It's like the pen and paper are a catalyst. So when whatever you've been experiencing, so in a sense you've always been writing because your mind has been taking these notes. So before writing, this process is always going on inside your head. And when you actually sit down to write, of course it's a struggle. It's a huge struggle because writing doesn't come easily to me. I can't sit down and dash off 1,200 words or 1,500 words at one stroke. It is a word by word, line by line, paragraph by paragraph process. And I don't make second drafts. I keep writing on the same draft till I've got the whole paragraph perfect. And then I carry on to the next one after that. So that's how it happens for me, and different people have different writing processes. So my process has been this. But I can tell you this much, that once the struggle is over, once you have written down what you wanted to write, there's nothing quite that matches that euphoria that you get. The pleasure, the joy of writing, nothing quite matches it, except perhaps the pleasure of motherhood. When you create a child or when you create a work of art, it gives you a similar pleasure. So I think I would say it's the deepest pleasure, that joy that you can get from writing.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you again, Your Majesty. And thank you, for all of you, for listening to us so patiently and being present here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.